Welcome to the Geo Week 2021 side event on utilization Earth observation data to enhance access to climate finance. The effect of climate change and extreme weather event become more apparent. It's one thing understanding that our climate is changing, but it's entirely different matter knowing exactly what that means to us, what risk are we likely to face, what and when is going to be a strike, and how actually we're going to adopt and minimize them. The advancement in Earth observation and data as well as technology allows countries to cost-effective access and utilization of data for risk assessment, developing plans, design and implement climate change projects and programs. The IPP Climate Common Sensing Project, with an emphasis to utilization of EO Earth observation solution, making an enormous application in three pilot Pacific Island countries, Solomon Islands, Fiji, and Vanuatu. And we're gonna share some of our good practices and lessons learned from this particular project from these three distinct Pacific Island countries. We have together with us distinguished speaker from these countries, as well as specialists from Tonkin and Taylor and Common Sensing Secretariat. With these things, I just like to share with you a small video about the Common Sensing project. Let's first see about the project itself, and then from there on, we'll be sharing all the cases study one by one. Thanks again. Could you please upload the video?
Sorry, can everyone see the video?
No. I think it's on the different screen. Would you be able to try one more time? Otherwise, we just move to our next speaker. Yep.
I can't hear it though.
There's no voice.
Let me give it one more try.
Perfect.
Access to climate finance can be an essential lifeline for developing countries. However, it can be difficult to access that climate financing, partly due to a lack of data to support applications. But now, many years of Earth observation data is available from satellite imagery, and it gives a wealth of information that can be used to provide rigorous, unbiased evidence to support funding applications. The satellite data has been collated in the Common Sensing platform for the governments of Fiji, Solomon Islands, and Vanuatu, and can be used for calculating baselines, reference conditions, and measuring the rate of change for many environmental conditions such as temperature, sea level rise, flooding, and land degradation. This information can be applied in ways that might be surprising. For example, you might want to show scientific evidence of coastline erosion over decades, or you might want to be able to find ideal locations to situate a solar farm. The data can help you to identify the right communities to participate in projects, identify boundaries to protected areas, and help in pre- and post-disaster management. Improved use of data and the dedicated support of Commonwealth National Climate Finance Advisors can contribute to turning country priorities and nationally determined contributions into climate finance investment plans. With more evidence, you can build stronger applications which improve your chances of gaining funds. This is especially relevant in the context of rebuilding economies in the aftermath of COVID-19. To build resilience in our communities, decision makers must use all available data to guide their choices. These days, this can include satellite data to understand changing climate variables and how they impact daily lives. Learn more about how the Commonwealth Climate Change section, through interventions like Common Sensing in Fiji, Solomon Islands and Vanuatu, and the Climate Finance Access Hub can help you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing the fascinating activity as well as the project, which actually implies overall the GEO's goal to implementing how the geodata could be applied for social benefit. Now let's go back to our presenter, Ms. Sharon Negati from Commonwealth Secretariat to learn about the Common Sensing project itself and how actually the Climate Finance Access Hub works. Sharon, over to you.
Thank you, Bapon, and good morning, everybody. My name is Sharon Yetich. I'm the Climate Change Officer at the Commonwealth Secretariat. And today I will be talking to you about how we're supporting member states to access climate finance through the project that we're calling the Common Sensing Project. So if you give me just a minute, I will share my screen and I have a presentation prepared. So Bapon, can you just confirm that everyone can see my screen and can hear me?
Yeah, everything is loud and clear. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. So as I mentioned, I'm going to just talk to you about the Common Sensing Project and the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub. And these two initiatives are actually the basis from which we're sharing our experiences with you today. So this will just sort of explain and set the context before we delve deeper later on into some of the country perspectives. So the IPP Common Sensing Project is an innovative project based on a partnership between Fiji, Solomon Islands, and Vanuatu, and a consortium of international partners, where we're all working together to support and build climate resilience and enhance decision-making using satellite remote sensing technology. So the consortium of partners working together, you can see below, is very diverse. And the advantage of working together as a consortium on this project is that we're able to leverage on each other's strengths and expertise, where each partner contributes and brings a particular dimension, and all aimed at benefiting the three small island member states to enhance decision-making, have more evidence, and better use satellite remote sensing technologies and Earth observation data. So the project, this Common Sensing project, is being implemented through three delivery mechanisms. So capacity building, technical assistance, and we're delivering a geospatial platform. So on capacity building, what we're doing is helping to build the skills, technical skills of ministry officials in country to not only better utilize, but also to enhance their use of geospatial data as well as climate finance. We're also providing technical assistance by embedding specialists that will support the capacity building elements of the project. And the technical assistance is through embedding specialists in ministries, in specific ministries in Fiji, Vanuatu, and Solomon Islands. And we are embedding it's a two-pronged way of embedding them. We're embedding Commonwealth Climate Finance advisors, as well as UNISAT, one of our project partners, and the project lead is embedding GIS experts. The project is also developing a geospatial platform, which we're calling the Common Sensing platform. And this platform is providing a variety of data and tools to enable member states to have a platform where they can access lots of data and information to support their climate action and climate priorities. So there are four themes. Therefore, the project has four thematic areas, or is being implemented through four thematic areas. That's climate information, food security, disaster risk, and climate finance. So as I mentioned earlier, we're all working together and leveraging on each other's strengths. And so the Commonwealth is leading on the climate finance aspect of the IPP Common Sensing project. And we're implementing that through the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub. So the reason why we are coming forward or working on climate finance in this project is because we've been working on climate finance since 2016. This is when the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub was established. And what the hub does is that it supports member states to improve their access to climate finance by embedding technical specialists that we're calling Commonwealth National Climate Finance Advisors in the countries that request support. And what the advisors do is they build both institutional and human capacity to support member states to develop project proposals, design bankable proposals, and submit them. They also support member states to design strategies, plans, and policies that will better enable them to access climate finance. So in terms of the interlinkage between accessing climate finance and EO data, what we found is that there's a significant scope to improve access to use and use of EO data in climate finance proposals and concept notes. This actually was a topic of discussion that we had for our discussion paper, and that we launched earlier on this year, that you can see over there on the right. And it also forms the basis of our work stream of the Commonwealth's work stream under the IPP Common Sensing Project. We've seen that EO data is most effective when used in climate change proposals when used alongside other data sets and applications. So EO data can be used to support a variety of sectoral climate finance proposals and projects, or we've seen that, you know, it's also best, EO data can also, we can also have proposals that are aimed at improving the access, use, and application of EO data and related tools. So this is where you have specific climate finance proposals where you're actually requesting for funding and money to improve your tools and applications that use EO data. For example, to improve your early warning systems. That's quite a common project proposal that I've seen in a lot of countries, or to improve your climate information services. So in terms of where EO data comes in for climate finance, as I've said before, at various stages throughout the project cycle, you can use Earth observation data to enhance the evidence base of the climate finance proposal. So you can use that as a concept note stage, full proposal stage, and also in the implementation and monitoring stage of a climate finance proposal, where you can show how you can use Earth observation data to show how you will implement and monitor that project. And so the strength that Earth observation data really provides is that you're able to, in climate finance proposals, is demonstrating the climate rationale and the evidence base for why a particular intervention is needed, when and why. So that evidence base is really a strong requirement from the key climate funds, where they need you to be able to justify exactly why this intervention is required, and show evidence of why your country or the particular intervention area is at risk from climate change. So I think this is where EO data really has a strong role to play in climate finance proposals. So EO data can help in calculating baselines, reference conditions, and measuring the rate and direction of change for key project variables. And so that's really helpful, like I said, in showing the risk, highlighting risk and vulnerability, and also the scale of project for impact. So you're able to demonstrate the scale and intensity of vulnerability by using Earth observation data. You can show that this particular location is vulnerable from these particular climate variables, and this is how the hazards or variables have changed over time, and this is why we are requesting for funding. That is putting it simply, but that's the basis is where EO data really comes in climate finance proposals. We can also use EO data for monitoring impact and, you know, demonstrating the effective use of resources. So, for example, you can, if your proposal is about is linked to forest cover and deforestation and carbon emissions, you can show over time, if your project is aimed at improving that situation, you can show over time how you've been able to increase forest cover or vegetation cover, for example. So here I have just one example of a successful project proposal from Solomon Islands, which managed to secure $4.3 million US of funding from the Adaptation Fund. And this is just a snippet of how they used Earth observation data in that project proposal to highlight vulnerability and the scale of the vulnerability and the scale of what the project required to do in order to achieve some impact. So you can see over there, they were able to map hazards and show vulnerability spots in different settlements. So looking ahead, what we can say is that EO technology and related applications are most effective when applied alongside other interventions. However, what we found out and what we're seeing, not only through our experience in the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub, but also under IPP Common Sensing Project, is that you really need to make the best use of, to help member states, especially the small and vulnerable, you really need to have a lot of capacity building alongside these sort of interventions and new technologies. And that's the best way in which you can support countries to make best use of it. So looking forward, what we'll do in CIFA is that we will continue providing support to member states and other vulnerable states to access climate finance, not only looking at one dimension, but look at the whole picture, looking at both human, institutional capacity building and also pipeline development. You need to support, member states really need help in developing these pipeline projects and incorporating EO data in those pipeline projects. And they're already incorporating them, but what we're saying is making them better, making them more evidence-based, making them more robust, and strengthening the bankability of those projects by using EO data to have a really strong climate rationale and justification for why a project should be funded. So under the Common Sensing Project and beyond, we're also going to be working to scale up, replicate, and increase the use of EO data solutions and applications to enhance the development of robust evidence-based climate applications. So this is just a really brief introduction. Unfortunately, I could not go into a lot of details because of time, and we could not go into a lot of details in this presentation on the geospatial platform, which we're calling the Common Sensing platform that we have developed in the project. But my colleagues later will be able to give you a snippet of how we're applying and using that platform. So with that, I think I'll end there. I hope we can answer questions at the very end, but I hope I've just given you a little bit of a brief introduction as to what we're doing as the Commonwealth Secretariat under the IPP Common Sensing Project, working with very experienced partners in the project to support our member states. So I'll leave it there and I'll hand over back to you, Bapon. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm sure that many countries will be coming back to you to asking for help to getting some fascinating support, how actually the EU data could be applied for their project risk assessment, financing, and many other sectors. Well, now let's move from the common sensing back to the Pacifica. We'd like to now listen from Ben Sim, who is working in the Tonkin and Taylor, who will be sharing with us some of the potential application of EO data in strengthening financing as well as climate vulnerable sector, as we always actually seeking for data for any kind of risk assessment, and data is a challenging. Let's hear from him some minutes. Over to you, Ben.
Thanks, Bapon, and hello everyone. I'm from Auckland, New Zealand. Can you go to the next slide, please, Shrinkala? So just to follow up on Sharon's presentation, EO data is a very powerful tool for supporting the design and implementation of projects across a number of sectors. It can be used for planning, both at the sectoral and national level, and also prioritizing climate actions, including through identifying vulnerable communities and geographic areas of the country. And it has been used in a range of climate projects across the 3 countries. And my presentation will go through some of the examples from these 3 countries, and the subsequent presentations from my colleagues will go into more detail on how climate finance can be accessed through EO applications. Next slide. So as a part of the Common Sensing project, Tonkin and Taylor did some research for the Commonwealth Secretariat on looking at these three countries and the potential for using EO data or SRS, so satellite data, and also the past data utilization across the different sectors. So this just gives a snapshot of the potential for using satellite data and EO data across the sectors in Fiji and how these were utilized in the past. Next slide, please. So for Fiji, EO data has been used for a DRR, and it's been used for disaster preparedness, and satellite data in particular can be used to support the identification of evacuation routes for communities and evaluate roads and key facilities to confirm their usability after a disaster. It can also be used for disaster response. For example, the use of a rapid mapping tool. So this image here shows a tool that Tonkin and Taylor developed with some partners following Tropical Cyclone Winston in Fiji. And this web-based information portal used GIS, and it provided guidance on the location of relief and the different sites where the aid relief was available. Next slide, please. And we also did the analysis for the Solomon Islands, and again, this table here shows the potential for using EO data and where it was used successfully in the past. And as you can see here, it has been used in a number of different sectors, including the transport, energy, forest and land use sector, in DRR, agriculture, water supply and wastewater, and also the health sector. Next slide, please. And in the Solomon Islands, EO data has been used in the past for developing climate resilient infrastructure. And this has included measuring changes in the deformation of buildings and infrastructure, such as roads. And the Ministry of Infrastructure in the Solomon Islands has a well-developed asset database which uses EO data to understand and monitor the condition of infrastructure assets in the Solomon Islands. And here, this slide here shows the assessment for Vanuatu. And in Vanuatu, they have used EO data in the energy, forest and land use, DRR, agriculture and water supply and wastewater sectors. Next slide, please. And just a quick case study on Vanuatu. So at present in Vanuatu, there's limited data on the status of ecosystems and ecosystem services and the potential risks that climate change poses to these, and therefore further research is required. And EO data can be used for monitoring changes in ecosystems and biodiversity, and it's expected to represent one of the most cost-effective ways to identify ecosystems at risk from climate change. And it can be used for monitoring data on habitat quality, vegetation indices, and the estimation of evapotranspiration. And importantly, it can be used to identify where the most critical changes are taking place, which can highlight the biggest threats to ecosystems and biodiversity. And it can therefore act as an early warning system and inform where interventions should be focused in the country. So that was a very brief snapshot of the research that we have done for these 3 countries, and the Commonwealth Secretariat will shortly publish reports on these 3 countries that will be available on their website. And I'll hand it back to you, Bapon. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. Dear participant, please feel free to raise your questions. We'll be going back to the question and answer session right after the 3 case study or fascinating case study you are going to listen. Abdul Rahim, thanks for your question. We got your question and we'll be answering that. Just wait with us some few moments. Let's move to the countries, and I think we all are actually quite waiting to listen from the country experience, which actually gives us a little bit in-ground understanding how the supporting access to climate finance actually applied in the Solomon Islands. So let's listen from Dr. Michelle Hapu as well as Miss Joy Papua, who are actually the in-country representative from UNITAR, as well as the National Climate Change Advisor from Solomon Island. They'll be sharing their experience, how actually they use the EO data for their project financing or climate financing proposal application. Dr. Michelle, over to you. Can anyone share the presentation?
Yes, I'm just sharing it now. And if I can also just request everyone to kindly turn up your laptop volume to maximum so you can hear the recorded audio clearly. Okay. Can you please confirm you can see the presentation?
No, it's a different screen you're sharing.
Okay, right.
In the meantime, participant, if you could just also in the chat box write down where you are actually joining, that would be quite nice to listen. Before, yeah, we can see now the slides. So
you can see the slides.
Full screen. And please ask questions.
Welcome to the presentation. There are about 4 thematic areas which the common system platform sort of focuses on in the country. Number 1 is climate which disaster resilience, food security, and climate financing is a new kind of whole suite of areas. So in terms of climate information, it provides general public of information about climate change within the country. For example, it identifies problems, it monitors changes, manages responding to events, it performs forecasting and understands the trends in terms of how community or the government for that matter, that disseminate information about climate change to the people at large. For example, the application of the GIT application in terms of the current pandemic, ministry also utilizes, or the National Disaster Management Office utilizes this common system platform as to monitor the number of people coming into the country and are kept at these quarantine stations. So to speak, it build a COVID-19 quarantine station dashboard, meaning that people coming in, how many days they kept in the other stations, which stations they are located, and also who is funding their stay, whether it's private or government or another donor. And so this decision is very important so that the government will help control the number of flights coming into the country or within a period of time, and also in terms of resources, so that those people are also looked after carefully before coming into the community. Also, in addition to that, the application of the GIT was also used to monitor the rollout of the vaccine out into the community or the country. For example, if the platform is being used to to record the number of people or population among the eligible population that are required to get the vaccine, and it also take account on those people who have taken their first vaccine, and also taking account also in terms of people who already taken their second dose of vaccine. So this information is important so that it feed into the Ministry of Health to make decision as to on how promotions and awareness and encouraging the people to come out and get their vaccine, so that businesses and other country operations will continue to run. The other example of the GIT application is the tsunami risk mapping in the country. For example, the mapping of the tsunami zone within the Honera city. So it provides the color with the red. Those are those areas that are high vulnerable to a likely impact of a tsunami if there is a tsunami occur somewhere outside the Honera. So this it informs public in general, so that they can be aware. Should there is a warning, then people must be aware where to go and know how to manage a big number of population going out from these areas. Another example of the GIT application, as I've said, is the food susceptibility of sunrise. So it also provides areas that are vulnerable to food security issues. For example, should there be any disaster, then there's a highly likely that these areas will definitely need food supplies. The fourth thematic area that is being utilized by the common sensing platform is building together of the climate finance ability to put together proposals that are of bankable nature and or quality that or standard that could be able to get funding from international donors. In terms of this climate financing, we are at the moment currently working on a huge project, relatively large project, and that is the relocation of the National Referral Hospital here in the Honiara to a much safer location inland on the same island, which is Guadalcanal. So this is trying to build climate change rationale. Why it is important that the relocation of number 9 is evident, or is something that must be done, linking that to the impact of climate change. Like I said, coastal erosion is one of the climatic, related induced elements that through common sensing we try to put together a good, argument that is very important for the hospital to be relocated from Honera, from the current position to the new identified area. Also, the hospital close to the riverside, and there is also an impact of the flooding through also the hospital close to the riverside, and there is also an impact of the flooding through the river, exposes a very high risk to the hospital as well. So through this common sensing platform, we can project the increasing level of forecasted rainfall, and highly likely they will contribute to flooding, and that is why it's important that the hospital is located.
Thank you so much, Dr. Michel. That's quite interesting to see how actually the critical infrastructure risk or understanding our risk is quite important using the geo data or Earth observation data. Now let's move to the Vanuatu. Sorry, before going to Vanuatu, let's move to the Fiji to listen from Catherine Cook and also from the LEBA how actually they applied the Earth observation data for their climate financing. Catherine.
Thanks, Stefan. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Good. And Shrinkala is just preparing the slides. So just firstly, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work that we've been doing in Fiji. Firstly, the user testing, and then the awareness raising and capacity building, and then some of the practical implementation. So in the model that Sharon described, I'm the National Climate Finance Advisor for Fiji. And my colleague Lemba is the GIS specialist from UNITAR, and she'll be talking about her work on a specific project. You okay with the slides, Shrinkala?
Hi, yeah, I'm just sharing my screen now. This might be a bit of a trial and error again. I believe you can see the ME screen.
Yeah.
I'm pulling up the PPT now. Can you see it?
No.
Are you able to see the presentation?
Is it wrong?
No? Okay. Right. So let's share window. Okay. Can you see this now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic.
Okay, I'm conscious of time as well. So just in light of preserving the agenda, I'll try and race through quite quickly. But as colleagues before me have said, that please do get in touch with us if you want any more information on this, and we can talk more in detail about some of the projects. Next slide, please, Shrinkala. So really just in country, what the objective is to do. As Sharon outlined, there's an issue with climate finance. Certainly in Fiji, there's a deficit of 3.28 billion Fijian dollars in climate finance. And, the climate finance flows, some of you that have been to the recent COP understand, have that clear understanding, and it's quite startling that only 20% of climate finance goes to LDCs. Only 3% of that goes to SIDS, and only 1% of that goes to Pacific SIDS. So really, but to access this climate finance, you need to provide robust data and clear climate rationale. So all of the large major climate funds have been quite explicit about this in their independent evaluations. So what we're trying to do is use the common sensing, satellite, Earth observation, geospatial data to strengthen these climate finance proposals at this front end, and use them to help in decision making, accessing data. And this can be used at all stages of the project cycle. So right from the kind of project design, understanding, theory of change, but also implementation, and then retrospectively the monitoring and evaluation as well of the project. So really just to give you a quick flavor of some of the DataCube products that can be used in both mitigation and adaptation projects. So for example, for adaptation projects and dealing with climate change, you'd be looking at the shoreline extraction and sea surface temperatures, which you might want to use as part of the products. And then for even for mitigation projects, so things like solar projects, you might be looking at land use cover and climatic impacts as well, wind speeds, solar radiation. Can we go to the next slide, please? This is just a very brief one to show you some of the user testing that we have been doing across the different projects. So we've taken projects that have already been implemented or are underway and to look at those through the lens of the common sensing platform to see how we could add value and clear robust rationale to those projects. Next slide, please. And then, just coming finally to the end, just to talk about some of the things that we have been doing in Fiji. We've been doing in terms of capacity building. So recently in August and September, we conducted a climate finance write shop. So that was working with members of the Ministry of Economy, around 40 staff, Fiji Bureau of Statistics, and then also the Fiji Development Bank, that are the main direct access entity for the Green Climate Fund. And we ran through different climate finance projects. So these are bankable projects that they actually in the project pipeline, so entirely demand led. We looked at an electric bus project, so decarbonisation of public bus transportation in Suva, Fiji rural electrification, and also climate change relocation, which my colleague Lemba is going to talk about now. And in more detail, and really just to say that this sort of started to introduce and raise awareness of the platform, demonstrate. We did a lot of demos with my colleague Ben, who's on this call, and Lemba, ran these demos and let people have a go at some of the common sensing tools. Really, the final thing to say on this is that it's in terms of capacity building, we're working really closely with the University of South Pacific. So the products, the data cube and the analysis ready data are also being taught already in various courses, and research students are using these tools for across obviously earth sciences and GIS, but also maths and medical studies as well. These tools can be used. So it's really kind of building that capacity from the university stages, and then it will be embedded in the Ministry of Economy and can be used for finance and implementation of the pipeline for the nationally determined contribution. I'm going to hand over, just go to the next slide. I think that's my final slide. Yeah, this was really just to show some of the projects that we're working on, looking at through the lens of the climate, of the common sensing tool. So this is a Fiji Rural Electrification Fund, which is a revolving fund giving opportunities to local public-private partnerships for solar investors. But also what we're looking at is accessing finance for phase 3 of this project. And this will be looked at through the lens of the common sensing platform. Again, using some of these tools and data cube products. Final slide on electric buses. This is another project that we're looking at, again, looking at products such as, this is for shuttle bus stations for electric buses in and outside Suva. That was announced in the last budget. So that will be up and running, again, common sensing through the lens of this platform, looking at slope elevation, road networks, and things like that. So really demonstratively for both adaptation and mitigation projects. My colleague Lemba, who's the UNITAR GIS expert, is now going to talk a little bit about one of the projects that she's been working on, the climate change relocation. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Shrinkala, if you can just add on to the, next slide. Thank you. So I'll just touch on some practical examples from Fiji where Earth observation data is used to support climate finance in terms of the planned relocation. So very quickly, just to put it into perspective, the climate mobility situation in Fiji, the forms of human mobility that we primarily deal with, displacement, migration, and the planned relocation, which is the focus of this part of the presentation. So the movement is primarily internal and gradual, and a couple of statistics there on Fiji's risk profile, with displacement risk, for example, being highest with storm surges. There's a 56% probability that in the next 20 years, about 35,000 people will be displaced as a result of storm surges in Fiji, and about 5,800 people on average likely to be displaced during any given year in the country from sudden onset events like earthquakes and tropical cyclones, which we face every year. We're currently going through a cyclone period. Then, there's the cost of human mobility, financial and human costs. So in light of that, next slide, please. Yes, so essentially the aim of of this part of the climate finance work is to draft a proposal to support bilateral and multilateral partnership to support this climate relocation work. So we have already a trust fund that's established with the Trust Fund Act, which we have like a source of funding from our environmental levy from the government, and there's also already a couple of millions there from the New Zealand government, and we are targeting for as priority top 15 communities at the moment that's been identified and prioritized, and we have a comprehensive risk assessment framework to prioritize which of these communities should be relocated first based on the data from this from that ranking. So common sensing solutions will come in to support the development of the proposals as well, to capitalize on the finance that can support both the trust fund as well as other interventions that can still be explored to try to avoid relocation where that's possible. Next slide, please. Yeah, so in light of that, the Fijian government's commitment to building resilience and adaptive capacity of Fijians through targeted interventions means, having the necessary policies and plans in place to help guide these efforts. So here are the policies and plans and frameworks that currently guide our work. We have the National Development Plan, our 5 to 20-year plans, the National Adaptation Plan, our National Climate Change Policy, and more recently before COP, the Parliament passed the Climate Change Act, which gives us legislative powers to achieve our targets and push these commitments of net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And with the support of GIZ, we already have like a plan relocation guideline, a displacement guideline. The plan relocation guideline is only considered, the plan relocation process itself is only considered when all other adaptation options have been explored and exhausted. Plan relocation is more a state-led process. It's led by the Ministry of Economy, which both Catherine and I are embedded in, and then the displacement is more not primarily government-led. So it's initiated at any time, led by the affected community, but it can be supported by government and development partners where relevant. As part of the plan relocation guideline, Fiji is now finalizing our standard operating procedure. This one, yes, for the plan relocation guideline, which defines the specific processes and the necessary consultations and technical studies that need to be carried out, and the activities and how we're going to phase that out for an effective relocation. So included there is a comprehensive risk assessment framework that will be used to prioritize the communities based on the parameters that have been agreed by the relocation task force, which involves all the major players in this process. Next slide. Yeah, so Common Sensing is deploying a number of tools for Fiji on the platform already, as well as some data that would be helpful from the Open Data Cube, which is an exciting development in this space. So this includes our decision support system, which includes a tool for comparing risks at the district level, which is the admin unit 3. And we have another tool, diagnostic analysis, for visualizing the primary factors leading to a district being ranked higher risk, comparing it to another district, that may be flagged as marginally or low risk. And then the one that is we will run a workshop on with the relocation task force is this multi-criteria analysis tool, which has essentially a set of parameters that users can select from to determine ideal locations, where users can then run the model and generate suitability maps, as in areas most suitable or least suitable to the criteria that the users select, and the criteria that they define or attribute a relative weighting to. So we have this decision support system that compares risks, and part of the system includes the MCDA tool. And this is helpful in identifying those potential alternative sites for the community relocation. And this is another opportunity to identify, to support climate finance, in that those communities that do not meet the threshold for relocation, that fall under marginally or low risk, it means that there are still other possible interventions that should be explored, like seawalls, mangrove seedling projects, where you can, development partners can also support those interventions. And when we do an in-situ adaptation study of these 15 communities, those are the recommendations with the costed plans for those other options. Okay, next slide. I think that's the final slide. Okay, so just to reiterate that the plan relocation is a state-led process facilitated through the relocation task force, which the Common Sensing Project supports. And we have an extension of this work with UNDRR. They will, together with the Common Sensing, we will be supporting the in-situ adaptation study on the 15 communities to identify those alternative interventions that can possibly avoid relocation and define what are the building back better or other alternative adaptation can still be executed. And we continue to support Ministry of Economy's decision support systems in the form of the relocation dashboards that's being published from the systems that we have here based at the Government Data Center, as well as the system that we housing at USB, which has a regional, more regional outreach. Yeah, so thank you very much. I think that's this here is just essentially the communities that have been successfully relocated so far.
Thank you, Leba, for sharing your thought. We really listened to great case study from Fiji as well as Solomon Island. Now let's move to the, Leba, if you could just mute yourself. Yeah, so let's move to the question and answer session. Dear Abdurrahim Shafi, thanks for raising your question quite early. And I'd like to request all our speakers, if you could just open your video camera, and then whoever would like to answer, you can unmute and answer. So Abdurrahim Shafi, brother, has been asked a question to you guys on what are the data set that we have available to address the food security on the geospatial platform, and what kind of action they will suggest for farmer and supplier. Very relevant question for farmer and food security aspect. Anyone like to pick up the to answer Abdurrahman Shafi?
Thanks, Bapon, and thanks for your question. So Abdul, I think MX has already, our colleague has already put some answers in the chat for you there, but the platform does have a variety of data and tools on it. So on soil temperature, rainfall, elevation models, vegetation cover, and so on, which can support farmers to make certain decisions about their farming practices and agriculture. There's also an app on there specifically designed for Fiji for this sugar industry. So that's sort of the support we've been able to provide on food security. I don't know if my colleague Lemba, who's a GIS expert, has any more information on that.
Thank you, Sharon. Probably just support what you mentioned earlier with the climate data is more probably the climate data and the climate projections that you can overlay with the farmers. The one that is on the Common Sensing main platform.
Thanks, Leba, for supporting. Melanie, thanks so much for asking again a question for Catherine, and I think that's quite important question you raised. So Catherine, Melanie asked, I mean, obviously the climate financing reaching to the LGC and seeds are a concern, but how you can actually upscale these things widely? What are the problem or challenges you'll be facing for scaling up? Any specific challenges that you faced already?
So in scaling up or accessing climate finance?
It's more about the question is how you can actually, Common Sensing is helping to solve this, and how do you think this can be scaled up?
Okay, well, Common Sensing is specifically trying to help. This is the main objective of Common Sensing, helping to solve this by making those proposals that would previously have been submitted more robust. So, for example, in proposals, often you have to provide the climate rationale, the maps, you have to provide baseline data. Right now, for a lot of these proposals, it might be a case that actually we can't even enter, a lot of the country-specific SIDS and other LDCs aren't even able to enter a proposal or understand the quite complex and requirements from the donors. So not only does this help to better understand, build capacity to understand, but also provide the evidence that's needed for the climate rationale sections, but also for obtaining those baselines. And also something that Lemba talked about, decision making as well. So that ability with the MCDA tools for the common sensing, being able to prioritize the most risky areas that should be the recipients of that funding. So being able to kind of quickly streamline, plan the project, define what's needed, and then provide the evidence to back up why it's needed and where it is needed first. And those are then created and prepared and put into the proposals themselves, and then submitted. So the idea is that this would help to kind of stream or facilitate finance access to those countries.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for answering. And also, there are actually a huge amount of data that, as a Pacific, if you are working or listening from Pacific, Pacific has a data hub. And then using that data hub, integrating the common sensing platform, you can actually create lots of magic, actually, if you want to for your sector, for your own organization, for your own self. So with further not delay, I'd like to hand it over to Oxels to give a closing remarks, and thanks everyone for sharing with your thoughts. Great case study. I'm sure you will be flooded with many of the questions and requests from other Pacific Island or other Sea Island. Oxels, over to you for your closing remarks.
Thank you, Papon. My name is Khalid Sispanda, and I'm an advisor in the Commonwealth Secretariat on climate change. And I team does this work, coordinates the climate access element of the common sensing project. It's been a delightful thing to be able to share and be very delighted. And as many of you know, there is a funding gap. And we know that. Not just a funding gap, we know there is an ambition gap. And this has been clear from the COP26 meeting that's just been held in Glasgow. And for countries such as those in the Pacific, with which we presented the case studies today, finance is very, very critical. And Earth observation data allows us to make sure that that funding gap of about 1.5 trillion is reduced as far as possible with unbiased, rigorous, evidence-based justification for the project proposals. Our hope is that within the Commonwealth, we will continue to support member countries. This cannot be done by ourselves, as you have seen in the presentations this morning. We've had Tonkin and Taylor, we have had UNITA and ourselves, and it is bringing all that expertise from finance, from GIS, together with the national governments that will make the difference. And so we want to thank you for listening and invite you into an ongoing conversation with ourselves, with our partners, in making sure that we close the financing gap that many of the seeds and vulnerable countries around the world have got. So back to you, Bapon, but from myself, I just want to say thank you, and thank you to Geo for availing us with this platform to share the work that we've been doing.
Thanks, Maxil. Thank you so much, everyone. And I think you can see that how a country, if you take your initiatives, a bottom-up approach could lead to it linking with the top-down approach. And you can actually create lots of evidence-based examples and also rationale to accessing finance for all the global sources. With these things, I welcome everyone and thanks for joining with us. It's been a quite interesting talk and listening all those case studies. So we look forward to work together again in the future. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.